What's going on, everybody? Welcome in. Happy Tuesday. This is your first off-season Q&A episode of the Barking Brown Show. I am Jacob at Roaches13. I will be answering your questions today. If you guys, as always, we are presented by Homage, our great friends over at Homage. I got my Brownie the Elf orange, just classic Cleveland Browns tee. Absolutely love it. Softest on the market. Cavs, Browns, Buckeyes, Guardians. You can get them all. Check them out. There's a link in the description down below for our friends over at Homage. Go check them out and get yourself set up with some great merch. Hey, looking forward if you guys want to get your questions in for these Q&As. If you're on YouTube, go over to the community tab, and there is something that I posted there for you to comment on. You can put your questions in there. You can send me an email, thebarkingbrownshow@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on Twitter at Roaches13, which I will put a post out every Saturday or Sunday. And I record these either Sunday or Monday nights, depending on waiting to see if I get enough questions. So anyway, we've got 5 great listener questions today that I want to get through, and I want to do these every week for the rest of the off season. So if you guys, something pops up at some point and you want my opinion on it, go ahead and throw it in there and we will get to it. So our first question, we're going to have a lot of questions, a lot of conversations about defensive tackles this offseason. So the first question is, when's the Tommy Togiai and Jordan Elliott experience over? Okay, that's a great question. I said, and I think I'm not alone in saying this, that a lot of people believe that probably Perion Winfrey might be the only defensive tackle they would seemingly want to have back. And I would kind of, lean to say, yeah, there's not a lot there from anyone else. I really like Tommy Togiai coming out, and I thought he could kind of develop. I just don't see any strides forward. With Jordan Elliott, I'm done. I wanted to be done before last year, and then I fell into the preseason. They were saying about how good he looked in his off-season workouts, and he was in shape, and he was this and that, and they had a really strong preseason, and I started drinking that Kool-Aid again. I mean, this was your 3rd season in the NFL, and our 4th season in the NFL? 3rd? I don't remember now at this point. I guess it was only his 3rd. So it was his 3rd season in the NFL, and he was going into it without a full sack to his name, and he made some plays, that sort of thing. I don't see, unless something – they moved on from Richard LeCount this year, which was the first player that Barry had drafted that actually didn't get retained on the practice squad or anything. He was a guy that they actually fully let go and let him walk. He did come back on the practice squad for a little bit, but you know what I'm talking about. So these are 2 that he developed. I don't know that they'll move on from Togiai. I think they should. But you're going to have to see how free agency and that ends up, because you're going to need 4 or 5 defensive tackles. Probably 4. They carried 4 most of this year and carried 5 edge rushers. And they might even – Togiai, I actually could see Togiai going to the practice squad. So I will say that the Jordan Elliott experience is over. I absolutely think it's over. I just don't see any reason to continue. But defensive tackle is a slow developing position, so I'm willing to keep Togiai on the practice squad, and because I do think he has some physical tools to be an early down run stopper, but he has absolutely no pass rush plan, so let's not have him be on the active roster. All right, moving on. Question 2 for today. Do you see Cleveland looking more at a speed receiver or a size type in the draft? Okay, so I paraphrased this question when I put it on here, but the full question was, do you see Cleveland looking at more of a Rashee Rice of SMU type wide receiver, more speed, or A.T. Perry at Wake Forest type with more size? I think it's speed. I think that's just what you don't have right now. I think in the end, that's all Cleveland doesn't have is a true consistent burner. Like, Amari's faster than you think he is, but he's going to win with route running and poise and little things. He's just not going to burn by you, right? Same with DPJ. He's going to win because he's big, strong, and he catches everything, even when it's contested, And I think DPJ is an A.T. Perry type wide receiver. I don't see any reason to bring another really big size type in here, but I think you should bring in another speed type. I think that is absolutely the way to go, because it's just what you don't have. And how long have we been begging for somebody to stretch the field, and it just never happened. Anthony Schwartz just didn't work out. We're sitting in this situation where we just want to get vertical to open things up for all the other pass catchers and all the running backs and all of that sort of thing. Rashee Rice, I think his age is out of the guardrails, and I think he goes a little too early. But Marvin Mims, Jalen Hyatt, if he falls, Raheem Jarrett from Maryland is another guy that falls in there. Rook, he's out of Washington State, and I can't think of his last name. But you're looking at guys like that are speedy burner types. I think Marvin Mims really falls in that late day 2, early day 3. He might slip a little bit from Oklahoma and plays in the slot. Zay Flowers is a guy I really like that plays in the slot and has that great speed. I think it ends up being someone like that just because I don't see a situation right now where there's not a lot of really speedy wide receivers. Mecole Hardman's a free agent, but he's going to want 10 plus million. You're not paying for that. I don't think they can make a move for Brandon Cooks or DeAndre Hopkins or anything like that. But I think you got to buy somebody that can win consistently inside and with speed and can slide outside. So I think that's what you're going to be targeting in the draft. Moving on, this is a really interesting question because I hadn't even really thought about this yet. Will the team bring in a young quarterback or an experienced one behind Deshaun Watson? That is a great question because, like I said, I had not even considered thinking about this. With what we can look at is Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry in the first 3 seasons, and that points to experienced backup, young practice squad arm. So Kellen Mond is still on the roster, and he very well could be the backup because you don't claim this guy and keep him on your 53 all season. And I understand that they had to because they claimed him off waivers, so they couldn't then put him on the practice squad immediately. So they had to keep him on the roster for a certain period of time. But they kept him on that roster and saw him in practice week in and week out, and he was not cut. That makes me believe he is the backup this year because they liked him enough to want to keep him protected on the active roster and to put a claim on him in the first place. And then I don't see you turning around unless he just has an awful camp. And I don't know what he looked like in practice this year, but like I said, he looked good enough to where they weren't like, you know what, we messed up, shouldn't have got this, get rid of him. I do think there is a potential for a third quarterback. They did, like I said, they did carry those 3, and they could do it again, and Kellen Mond could end up just being inactive. But I think, truth be told, push comes to shove right now as I sit here recording this on January 23rd, I think Kellen Mond is the backup, but I do think there is a veteran, Josh Dobbs was on the practice squad for a period of time, that sort of thing, a veteran that's been around. Josh Rosen was on there. And, they had Kyle Lauletta on there because I think Kellen Mond becomes kind of the backup. So I think you get, they had Nick Mullins for a while. A guy like that's probably what's brought in, but I think your backup. I think the main point of this question is who is the backup next year, and I do think it ends up being Kellen Mond. Okay, one more wide receiver question. Can we move on from Schwartz and Felton? We are getting there. I think we're getting there with Berry, looking at some of his picks that just haven't panned out. Look at DPJ. He develops really well in his 3rd season. I think Schwartz and Felton will both be on the roster in camp unless some weird trade comes up where either one of them is part of a trade, but you just don't really see like that very much. You see it in the NBA, some like younger guys that you throw in, they're expiring contracts and things like that. And the NFL just really doesn't do that very much. I have a tough time. I have a tough time with Felton more than Schwartz because at least with Schwartz, I understand what his role is supposed to be, even though I don't think he can perform at that level to get it done. With Felton, they just kept putting him on the field and running jet motions and never doing anything. Like I don't see a reason really to keep either of these 2 players going into next season. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I like Schwartz, and I think he's got the tools, and I think Felton can be dynamic in space, but I just don't see a role for them on this team going forward unless it's just an absolutely mind-boggling good camp. But I thought Anthony Schwartz had a pretty good camp, and we saw what came from it, is my point. And so ultimately, I do believe it is time to move on from a couple more draft picks, and I think these 2 potentially again, practice squad if you're going to keep these guys. If somebody else wants to gallop them up, I don't think you're at any big loss. But otherwise, you can put them on the practice squad. All right, final question for this week's Q&A. With Jim Schwartz on board, will the team go back to looking for big defensive tackles instead of the speed guys? I think a combination. I think that the way they went about this Jim Schwartz situation, and they get him like right out the gate. They end up speaking to the guys they want to talk to. They talk to Flores, they talk to Schwartz, they talk to Sean Desai, and they talk to Denard Wilson. They talk to these guys they want to do, and then they strike. Flores probably is going to get a head coaching job. I thought it was going to be another year before he would, but it looks like he's going to probably get one of these head coaching jobs. And the funny thing is, the Browns hired Jim Schwartz, and then like 7 defensive coordinator jobs became available, or some weird number like that, where, you know, you've got some head coaches starting to make some decisions and moving on. And I think the Browns understood how important this hire was, how important it was not only to get Jim Schwartz on board, but to get Jim Schwartz's vision on board. So if Jim Schwartz goes up to because these conversations have already happened. What's your plan? You know, when you're interviewing, like, how are you going to turn this around? What do you need? What more than what do you need that's not already here? You know, and what can you work with here? Can you make Perion Winfrey a Pro Bowler? Can you, some things like that? So I think they did try a couple of times with Malik McDowell and Andrew Billings. There were some bigger run stuffing defensive tackles that they tried, and it just kind of didn't work. Well, now you're looking at a situation where you've got a veteran coach that can point to a ton of success with this type of personnel. So I think you will still get some of the speed guys, because you still have to be able to get pressure from your front four in some of those situations. So you are going to see some guys like, and I think it's where Perion Winfrey, for one, can come into play. I think he can play as one of those more of your rushers, third down NASCAR type packages. You can also kick like Alex Wright inside, and then, you've got all this fun stuff to play with. But I do think you will see a couple of big, quote unquote, big D tackles, the big run stuffers. You're going to see a guy, maybe like a Maze Smith or Keanu Benton, get drafted. Those are the top two for me, Keanu Benton and Maze Smith. And Byron Young. Oh, shame on me for leaving out Byron Young. But some guys like that get brought in that have some bigger, stronger abilities to play the run in it, as well as I think they're going to do kind of a rotation. I'm not sure they'll bring in a 3-down player unless, a deal just falls beautifully into place that they think would be perfect. But other than that, I think you will see some shifts in the type of players they overall gravitate to. And some things, I think things change. I think they understand how important this offseason is. And I think, the quote unquote go all in and make stuff happen now is going to start happening. Well, guys, I appreciate it. If you were watching me for the first time here on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, give a thumbs up, tell your friends about it. We appreciate every little bit, every single one of you. The most important thing, you can give somebody some of your time. So thanks again for giving some of your time to me. I'll be back with Randy Gurzy on Friday talking about tight end prospects in April's draft. But until then, as always, go Browns.